discuss the limbic system or the limbic nuclei, as well as the limbic system white matter. In a nutshell, when we talk about the limbic system, we are talking about combination of either the nuclei or the connections between the nuclei that form the limbic system. When we talk about the limbic system, we're not talking about one thing. We're talking about several groups of nuclei sparsely distributed within the cerebral hemisphere. So we said limbic system consists of two major structures, what we call the nuclei and the white matter connections. So that means this nuclei that I'm talking about, they are interconnected. And the connection actually is a little bit complex. You may have one nucleus connecting with several nuclei of the limbic system, or maybe connecting with only one nucleus, and so on and so forth. So the connection may be one with one nucleus or with multiple nuclei. You see, so, but the major function of all these connections between one nucleus and another, or between one nucleus and several nuclei, is mainly, basically for the first and foremost function of the limbic system is what we call behavioral function. If you can remember, we talked about the sexual behavior and feeding function while I was discussing the hypothalamus. We can remember that while we discussed about the issue of, the acute nucleus responsible for the feeding behavior. I also talked about the ventromedial nucleus of the hypothalamus. What is the satiety center? I made mention about it. I also talked about the dorsomedial nucleus of the hypothalamus. That is the anger and hunger center, So all these are, responsible for this feeding behavior with regard to the feeding function of the limbic system. Similarly, emotion is also part of the limbic function. We discussed about how, the amygdala, while we were discussing about the pathway circuit, the way the amygdala, connects with the hypothalamus, or from the hippocampus, you have a connection to the other part of the cerebral hemisphere, where the phonics connects with multiple areas, which we are going to discuss now. So when we talk about the emotion, we're talking about either fear, anger, happiness, sadness, rage, aggression, and so on and so forth. All these are part of the emotions that we express in our life. Similarly, the memory aspect, the episodic memory, you can remember that we discussed about the episodic memory with regard to the purpose circuit that I discussed during the discussion of the thalamus. Similarly, one of the most important functions of the limbic system is the olfaction. So especially the memory aspect of the memory and emotional aspect of the olfaction. So all these are the functions of the limbic system. So which are going to take each one of these functions one by one, and then we try to see what are the nuclei responsible for each of these functions, and what are the connections involved, between one nucleus and another to form or perform one of these functions that I have just made mention. So we need to know what are these various nuclei first, and then we know the connections between the nuclei. And then finally, we now link these connections with the functions. So if you can remember, we talked about the cingulate gyrus that is lying directly above the thalamus. Similarly, if you can remember, we talked about the mediodorsal nucleus of the thalamus. We also talked about the anterior thalamic nucleus. And so these are also part of the nuclei of the thalamus. So the cingulate gyrus, is part of the, limbic, nuclei. We also have what we call habenular nucleus, if you can remember, at the back of each of the two thalami. I made mention about smaller group of nuclei, what you call habenular nuclei, that they are interconnected together to form the habenular commissure. You can remember that. So habenular nucleus is also part of the limbic nuclei. Then similarly, we have discussed about the amygdala, which I said it is at the terminal end of the caudate nucleus. And so amygdala is also part of the nuclei of the limbic system. And we also discuss about what we call the hippocampus. You know, the hippocampus, the one we are discussing, the upper circuit, how it, make it its own, orientation, and so on and so forth, that enters into the mammillary body. You know that we will also recapitulate, what we have discussed before when I was trying to discuss this memory function of the limbic system. Similarly, the parahippocampus is also part of the nuclei of the, because, parahippocampus and the hippocampus are just part of the temporal lobe, the cortex, temporal cortex. So they are cell bodies, that. So these are part of the nuclei of the limbic system. And then again, we have what we call reticular formation. I think I made mention about reticular formation in one of our previous lectures. And I said that reticular formation is a scattered, group of cell bodies that is lying longitudinally like that across the entire length of the brainstem. So reticular formation passes across the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla oblongata in a vertical manner like that. So it has connections with various group of nuclei within the cerebral hemisphere. And so it is part of the limbic nuclei. Similarly, mammillary body, we discussed about the connection between the hippocampus and the mammillary body, and so it is also part of the limbic system. You can remember I also discussed about the posterior hypothalamic nucleus and anterior hypothalamic nucleus, which I said that they are responsible for the autonomic function of our own self. That is the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. The posterior hypothalamic nucleus for the sympathetic activity, while the anterior hypothalamic nucleus for the parasympathetic activity. So the two together, they are also part of the limbic function because they perform some autonomic function, which I will discuss with you later on. Similarly, the prefrontal cortex in front of each of the cerebral hemisphere, also that area is also part of the limbic, system. So we have seen these various nuclei that we have. We have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, almost about 13 or so nuclei. What I also forgot to tell you is that's what we call septal nucleus. This septal nucleus is around what you call the septum that is lying between the two ventricles. We have one lateral ventricle on one side, we have another ventricle on the other side. So in between the two, there is a septum there around the corpus callosum and the ventricle, the lateral ventricles. You have a septal area there. And so in the septum there, we have what we call group of nuclei there, what we call septal nucleus on each of these septum like that. So now the connections between these nuclei, the phonics that is being formed, you can remember we said that the phonics, takes origin from the hippocampus, passes upward, passes backward, upward, forward, downward, and backward into the mammillary body. Are you clear? So this is what you call the phonics. Similarly, we know that from the mammillary body, that we have another axon or neuron passing into the anterior thalamic nucleus, and that is what we call what? Mammillothalamic tract. And from there, we said that this one passes from there, from the anterior thalamic nucleus through the cingulate gyrus, back into the entorhinal, cortex that is present in the parahippocampus, and then from there it goes back into the hippocampus. So the circuit is completed, right? So this circuit is our purpose circuit, responsible for our episodic memory. Are you clear? So we have seen one of the functions of the limbic system. Are you all clear? Good. The second function is what we call olfaction, especially with regard to the memory, due to smell, sense of smell. For example, now, if I now come into this room and you smell maybe one of the perfume I put on my body, for example, probably you have never smelled such kind of perfume. So I'm sure when next you get out of this place and then you smell such kind of perfume outside, even if you don't see me, you remember that, that perfume is similar to the smell of perfume Anas used to, spread on his body. Are you clear? So you remember, And probably when I came and you smell the smell, it was bad. You feel annoyed when you smell it again. You say, I remember this is the type of perfume Anna's put. It's no good. So you start, making some mask, responsible. You're not showing happiness when you smell it. Are you clear? So you're expressing your emotion as a result of the previous smell memory you have had. Are you clear? So these are what we are just going to discuss now. So now, the sense of smell begins from the external environment. In the external environment, you have various, kind of, odors. Thousands of them in the atmosphere. So these odors, you have a lot of receptors that are lying inside our roof of the nose. The nose, has some walls, it has roof, and then it has a flue. So in the roof of each of our nose, you get my point, we have these olfactory receptors. You get it? So they now take this sense of smell from within the nose. And then there are fibers connecting these olfactory receptors. They now pass through what you call a cribriform plate at the base of the skull, in the frontal bone, base of the frontal bone. There are about 9. You have 9 to 10 on one side. You have 9 to 10 on the other side. In between them, you have what you call crista galli, demarcating the two together. So these fibers, from the nose, if this is the nose here. So these fibers, they just pass through the cribriform plate, and then they get out of the cribriform plate, and then they form what we call olfactory bulb at the base of the brain. Especially the temporal, the frontal lobe, you get it. So at the base of the frontal lobe, you have these bundles of fibers coming out of the roof of the nose from the olfactory receptors. They now form olfactory bulb at the base of the frontal lobe of each of the cerebral hemisphere. So after the formation of this olfactory bulb, this bulb continues backwards as a tract known as olfactory tract. Are you clear? So this olfactory tract, as it reaches towards the junction between the base of the frontal lobe and that of the temporal lobe, this olfactory tract divides into two: medial trunk and lateral trunk. Are you clear? So the lateral trunk, the medial trunk now unites in the midline, connects. There is a connection between the medial of one side and the medial of the other side through what we call anterior commissure. You get it? Because connection, when you have bundles of fibers connecting identical sides, that is what we call commissure. So it's at the anterior part here, so we call it anterior commissure here, between the two medial striae of the olfactory tract. The lateral one continues, backward, and then it divides into two. One of the branch reaches the amygdaloid body, and the other one reaches parahippocampal gyrus. Are you clear? So, or parahippocampal cortex. So, this connection of this lateral olfactory striae with the parahippocampus is responsible for the receiving the sense of the smell and also putting that smell into memory. You get my point? Because one of the major functions of the parahippocampus is to store information. And when you store information, you'll be able to retrieve it, similar to when you now come and save your money in the bank. Later on you come and collect it. The same thing here now, the information of that smell is being stored in the parahippocampus for the previous remembrance. Are you clear? So sense of memory of smell is located into the parahippocampus as a result of this connection of the lateral olfactory striae with that parahippocampus. So, but this connection of the medial part or medial branch of the lateral striae of the olfactory trunk, as it goes into the amygdala, this one is responsible for the emotional aspect of that sense of memory. Are you clear? When you remember, you feel happy. The smell is very nice. So you start smiling. This smell is good. Oh no, this smell is bad. You start frowning your face. Are you clear? Because you remembered it and it's no good. So this connection is responsible for expressing your emotion with regard to the sense of smell that you had or that you received before. So now we've seen the sense of function of the limbic system. The other one is to do with behavior. If you can remember, we said that some of the behavioral aspects of animals include sexual behavior, feeding behavior, and reproduction behavior, and how we now take care of our younger ones or our loved ones. Are you clear? So when we now take sex, for example, the amygdaloid body has connections with the hypothalamic nuclei. If you can remember, we talked about the preoptic nucleus that is located in the preoptic area of the hypothalamus. Are you clear? This preoptic nucleus of the hypothalamus, if you can remember, I said that it releases this hormone, gonadotropin-releasing hormone. Are you clear? And this gonadotropin-releasing hormone, apart from this nucleus producing it, I also made mention that there's also arcuate nucleus also producing the same hormone. So this hormone, as we said, that it acts on where? On the anterior pituitary gland to form or to produce, follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. And those ones, they act on our gonads. You get my point? So when they act on our gonads, they secrete these, sex hormones. Estrogen and progesterone in females, testosterone in men. Are you clear? So this one, they increase the sexual urge of we people. Are you clear? So increase level of testosterone and, the estrogen and progesterone in women. So this one, they increase the sexual drive or sexual urge or sexual orgasm of an individual. And so I said amygdaloid body has connection with this nuclei that I have just made mention. That is the preoptic nucleus of the hypothalamus and the arcuate nucleus of the hypothalamus for this increase in the sexual drive or, the orgasm, So similarly, the paraventricular nucleus of the hypothalamus, if you can remember, we said that one, produces, oxytocin that is stored in the posterior part of the pituitary gland. And that oxytocin also in women, it also increases their own sexual urge. Are you clear? So once this, the amygdaloid body connects with this, that is what is responsible for this, sexual behavior with regard to animals and what have you. When we come to the feeding behavior, you get it? The feeding behavior, we talked about the ventromedial nucleus of the hypothalamus, which we said that it is the satiety center. Are you clear? And also happiness center. You get my point? While the dorsomedial nucleus of the hypothalamus, I made mention that it is an anger and hunger center. So the amygdaloid body has connections with these two nuclei. Are you clear? So as if somebody is feeling hungry, this dorsomedial nucleus is going to be stimulated. Are you clear? And after this one is stimulated, this one is going to be inhibited, the ventromedial nucleus, and vice versa. Are you clear? So that means if somebody is now satisfied, this one is going to be inhibited, the ventromedial nucleus, and this one is going to be activated. No. You are satisfied. This one is going to be inhibited. The ventromedial nucleus is going to be inhibited. Is it? Stimulated. It's going to be stimulated because you are satisfied. And this one is going to be inhibited because you are no longer hungry. Are you clear? So that is exactly what is going on with the feeding and sexual behavior. It is on connection with amygdala and this nuclei. The other one is something to do with what is again? The emotions. You get my point. So, let me just try and the emotional aspect is still to do with this. When you talk about the emotional aspect, you are talking about, for example, somebody who is hungry will likely be angry. Somebody who is satisfied may likely be happy. All these are emotions. Are you clear? And it's as a result of these connections between the amygdala with this nuclei that I have made mention. Are you clear? So I think the other one that I think is left is what? It's something to do with autonomic nervous function, like when you want to show fear and maybe aggression or whatever. When you are afraid, for example, now you see something that is, fearful. When you are just sitting down here and you see somebody with a gun, you get it? I'm sure some of you will start running out of the window. Are you clear? Or probably maybe trying to hide under the table or what have you, because you are afraid whether you are going to die or not. But some of you who are very strong, they will fight back. You get my point? Those of us who are very weak will run away. Are you clear? So you either fight or you flight. And that is what the function of which of the hypothalamic nucleus? Posterior hypothalamic nucleus. Are you clear? And while you are just sitting down now here, digesting what you have eaten, that is the function of. So the amygdaloid body has connection with these two nuclei of the hypothalamus again. That is posterior hypothalamic nucleus and the anterior hypothalamic nucleus. So, but for you to be able to make a decision on whether to fight back or to run away, that means there has to be another connection between the amygdaloid body, these two hypothalamic nucleus, and the frontal lobe. If you can remember, when I was discussing some aspect of the cerebral hemispheres, we discussed about the prefrontal cortex, where we said that that area is responsible for, number one, personality, learning, judgment, you get it, decision making, reasoning, you get my point, all this stuff. So for you to be able to reason, whether to fight back, because you assess the person that comes inside, is as slim as I am. So you can fight him, you get my point. So that decision to fight back is because of this connection of amygdala with these two nuclei, as well as the connection with this frontal cortex. Are you clear? Similarly, decision to eat or not to eat while you are hungry. You get my point? You have that connection between that amygdaloid body with the, which nuclei? Ventromedial and dorsomedial nuclei. So that one too has connection with the prefrontal cortex. Like now I'm feeling hungry and I've not eaten. So I decided not to eat because I have lectures. Are you clear? So that decision also must come from the prefrontal cortex to inhibit which center now? Dorsomedial. Is it dorsomedial or? Dorsomedial. So if it inhibits the dorsomedial, what happens? I will not feel hungry, right? No. I'm still feeling hungry, but I'm not eating. Are you clear? So what happens to that center now? Is this stimulated? Stimulated. How about the ventromedial? It's inhibited. And yet, I have decided not to eat. Are you clear? So that means the connection is both ways. You have connection from the amygdala to the dorsomedial, ventromedial, then to the prefrontal cortex. Then for you to make the decision to eat, then that must to come back to, if you want to eat now, since you are feeling hungry, it will now come to the feeding center. Aquate nucleus. Are you clear? So that is how, because if I say I'm going to draw all this information, that it is likely going to fill in the body. I'm just trying to make you understand because we have discussed all this nuclei before. Are you with me or you are not? Yeah. Oh, good. Fine and good. So we have seen these, functions with regard to these connections. So now all these connections have names. Since we have now understood the nuclei, we have understood the functions. So let us know the connections and the names. Are you clear? So you know that we have connections between the hippocampus down to the mammillary body. That is what we call the phonics. Similarly, part of the phonical connection is with regard to the subtle nucleus. So after this one forms phonics, it also connects with the subtle nucleus here. So part of the phonical connection, apart from it connecting with the mammillary body, is with the subtle area. So phonics is a connection between the hippocampus and mammillary body as well as the subtle area. Are you clear? Similarly, amygdala, as I told you before, connects with the mammillary body. Are you clear? And apart from it connecting with mammillary body, it also connects with the subtle nucleus. So connection of the mammillary body with the subtle nucleus, this is amygdala body here. So it connects with this subtle nucleus here. So this is what we call stria terminalis. Are you clear? Amygdala connecting with the subtle nucleus, and also there is what we call ventral amygdaloid fugal pathway, and that pathway is between connection between the amygdaloid body with the thalamus. Are you clear? So the amygdaloid body connects with the mammillary body also, and that is what we call ventral amygdalofugal pathway. Similarly, subtle nucleus connect with the habenular nucleus. You can remember we talked about the habenular nucleus here, and so we have the subtle nucleus, and so the connection between this subtle nucleus and the habenular nucleus, you get it. And that one is what we call stria medullaris thalami. Similarly, we have mammillary body connecting with the thalamus, that is anterior thalamic nucleus. That means from this mammillary body here down to the anterior thalamus, that is what we call mammillothalamic tract, which we have discussed about that. And similarly, we have connection between the prefrontal cortex with the reticular formation. So you have a very long connections here with the prefrontal cortex down to the reticular formation, and that is what we call medial forebrain bundle. Are you clear? So this is just something to do with reticular activating system activity. If you can remember, we have discussed about the reticular activating system activity, that is the reticular formation. The time we were discussing the connection between the hypothalamic nuclei with the reticular formation before. If you can remember, that was a diagram I drew there. So by and large, I think these are the connections of importance that you people should get to know with regard to the limbic system, and also the nuclei they are also supposed to know with regard to the limbic system, and also the major functions regarding the limbic system. So I think in brief, this is what we people are expected to. Now I will just stop here. If you have any questions, you can ask.